Hi, I'm Michael Byrne. I'm a digital strategist at Digital to Dealer Direct, and I'm here to talk to you about bounce rate myths today. There's a lot of myths that are out there around bounce rates. A lot of people are going around and discussing them with dealers, talking about vendors and what their bounce rates are. I just wanted to clarify a few things that might give you a little bit more of an educated perspective on how to approach a situation like that. So myth number one, that if a visitor leaves immediately, that's the way a bounce is calculated. While a visitor coming to the site and leaving immediately will count as a bounce, that's not always the case. Time on site has nothing to do with a bounce. It all has to do with how many pages they view. So let's say a user clicks through on your ad and goes right to a lease specials page. They read all the information on the lease specials page, spend a minute or two there digesting everything, and then they leave because they got what they needed. That counts as a bounce and it'll register as 0 seconds on site. The way Google Analytics tracks traffic is it's between two pings. So the first ping starts when they enter and the second ping starts when they go to a next page. If they don't have that second reference point, it's marked as 0 seconds and that's the end of it. So yeah, a visitor leaving immediately will count as a bounce, but that's not always the case. They could spend up to a half hour on the site and still count as a bounce and register 0 seconds. Myth number two, a high bounce rate points to an issue with your website. While it can be an indicator of website issues, that's not always true. A high bounce rate could have something more to do with your campaigns than anything. In order to have an effective ad campaign, it has to be linked correctly to the page that corresponds with the creative in the ad. If there's a disparity between what the user clicks and what the user sees, they're gonna leave, because that's not what they came there for. So that will impact your bounce rate more so than a website issue, which brings us into low bounce rate equals success. Many people think you want your bounce rate to be as low as possible, but a low bounce rate is actually more indicative of a website issue than a high bounce rate. If your bounce rate is so low, like we're talking below 10%, you are not getting your visitors the information they need quickly and accurately. So what they're doing is they're coming into your site and they have to go 3-4 pages deep. If 90% of your traffic isn't finding the things that they came here looking for in the first 2 pages, you're not leading them down the path of success. The more clicks they have to go through to reach a conversion point, the less likely they are to convert. You want to get them right to what they're looking for as soon as possible. So an extremely low bounce rate does not always equal success. Myth number 4, a bounced visitor equals a lost conversion. That is not true at all. A person, let's take the same example we discussed in myth 1. Somebody clicks on your ad, goes through right to the lease specials page. They get to the page, they read all the information on the page, and they decide they want that lease right now. They either fill out the form on the bottom, or they pick up the phone and they call you, and they click out of that page. That's a perfect conversion. It's somebody came there for a specific thing, calling you for a specific thing to set up an appointment, and they still count as a bounce. So users that bounce can do what you want them to do. They don't always, but it's entirely possible that bounced users are conversions. And myth number 5 is probably one of the most pervasive ones in online advertising that I've seen, and it just has no basis in reality. The myth is that Google uses your bounce rate to calculate your SEO score and developer rankings. That is completely false, and there's no evidence to suggest that they're even correlated. A high bounce rate will not have a negative impact on your SEO. Even the chief spam officer at Google suggested that there is no correlation as well. 47% of websites on the internet do not use Google Analytics either. So if Google was factoring in bounce rates and analytics into their algorithm, they're writing off almost half the internet at that point to be ranked. So it just wouldn't make sense for them to do it. There's a million other factors that they can use to determine how relevant your content is, and bounce rate is definitely not one of them. So do not worry if your bounce rate is higher than normal. It is not impacting your quality scores in the Google rankings. I hope you learned something. I'm Mike Byrne, digital strategist at Digital to Dealer. Take care.